Lovecast with Dave O Rama.
The Lovecast. The Lovecast. The Lovecast.
The Lovecast with Dave O Rama.
Ciao, hola, and aloha. Welcome, Earthling Vibrators. It's time for your scheduled end-of-the-week dose of positive vibes for challenging times. Dave O Rama here to bring you another globalsonic schizophonic musical mix, specially designed for music lovers who aren't stuck in a groove. Summer continues as we find ourselves deep in the heart of it, with sunny days and comfortable temperatures in the mid-20s. If you feel the desire to secure the Lovecast on tap, like a coolly delicious soundtrack to your summer adventures, then please go and enjoy the hundreds of past broadcasts of the Lovecast that I have made available for you online at mixcloud.com/Dave O Rama or at thelovecast.podbean.com. And if you want to hook up with the Lovecast on the streams, then you can find links to the show on popular streaming platforms on our Podbean website banner, thelovecast.podbean.com. I've often proclaimed that I think the most important tool that humans have at their disposal is the power of imagination. From conceptualizing new solutions, technologies, and ideas to what the suffering of others and habitat devastation might look like, imagination brings us possibilities that may not exist or simply not exist in our own personal experience. My feeling is that the true power of empathy is fueled by imagination. When I listen to music, there is an aspect of the experience where I use my imagination in a cinematic way. I've been doing this since I was a child, long before the introduction of music videos and MTV. Music has always inspired me to create movies in my mind. Maybe you do the same thing. I'm in a chill mood today and the weather is sweet, so I thought today I would take the show down to the beach. Today the mix is warm and breezy, served with a splash of lime over ice. So serve yourself something cold, throw together a little picnic, grab your friends, and meet me down by the water as we chase tranquility as slowly and methodically as we possibly can here on the Lovecast.
Hi, I'm Dana Ashby, director and choreographer, and this is the Lovecast with Dave O Rama.
From Mali, Africa, guitarist Vieux Farka Touré, son of the late African master musician Ali Farka Touré, a 2022 release dedicated to his father in collaboration with Austin, Texas trio Khruangbin from the album simply entitled Ali. Vieux Farka Touré and Khruangbin with a trance-inducing piece of music called Tongo Barra, beautiful and hypnotic. Then we went all the way to Australia to hang with the masked instrumental trio Glass Beams. A bit of a surprise, as Glass Beams will be one of the headliners this year at the Shambhala Music Festival coming up in a couple of weeks at the Salmo River Ranch in British Columbia. Following Shambhala, the band will be doing a major tour of the United States. Glass Beams in the set with the instrumental Con. You'll discover a fair selection of Australian bands featured on the program today because they often create music inspired by the sun. And coming from the top with the last refreshing drop of tranquil Lovecast vibes, Ontario composer and multi-instrumentalist Pierre Chrétien, working with 14 other musicians with an emphasis on horns and strings to bring you his Cinephonic project. Cinephonic has 3 releases available on Bandcamp, and the latest is called Refuge. Although I went and referenced the 2023 Cinephonic release called Visions to play you a walk-in groove called Pyramids, a composition reminding me of my lovely little cabin on Crazy Acre with its vaulted central ceiling in the shape of a pyramid. So, enough respect to my friend Sandy, who originally envisioned and manifested some pyramid power here on Crazy Acre. Dave O Rama chilling out on the beach because that's what you're supposed to do on a beautiful summer day. I'm out here on the West Coast and you're probably all snuggled up to the Great Lake of Ontario, or maybe one of the many lovely lakes scattered all over our broadcast zone. Take your pick, there are so many. Regardless of where you're at, grab a hammock and get to the beach right now. I know Lydia and the 2 Kens are likely out on the beaches disturbing the peace in every good way possible. So from Vancouver Island, this is the band Gator to take you all out on a wave here on a summer Saturday from the Lovecast.
Chester, and you are listening to the Lovecast with Dave O Rama.
bobbing around in the sand dunes with the Golden Dawn Orchestra, straight out of Austin, Texas. Another Austin band. The last one wore wigs. This one wears strange masks and mystical robes. Something showing off their Texas roots called Vetiver, bringing a surreal cowboy vibe to the proceedings. Golden Dawn Orchestra from the 2019 release Darkness Falls on the Edge of Time. The debut release from Toronto band El Blotto Twangueros, fusing jazz, exotica, and vintage film music into a strange brew that will have your head swirling. The album is self-titled and available on Bandcamp as well. Dave O Rama taking a ride with El Blotto Twangueros down on the beach in their Dodge Caravan. Speaking of Bandcamp, the Colombian trio Balthvs has a pretty substantial selection of releases on their Bandcamp site as well. The band's new EP is called Flesh and Soul, but I went back a bit to 2022 and something called Light It Up from the Cause and Effect album. Balthvs is spelled B-A-L-T-H-V-S. And we eased into that set with some space dub from Nanaimo, BC band Gator, showing up with something moist in celebration of the brief smattering of rain we had out here on Lovecast Island that rewarded me with a little reprieve from watering the garden. Also available on Bandcamp, Gator and Rainy Sunday. Dave O Rama here, dropping some vibes out on the beach, taking in the beautiful sun rays with Mr. Dr.Brotherman as the Ghost Funk Orchestra lures in a solar wind for my friend Sam from the Lovecast.
I'm Nick.
I'm Aiko.
And we are from the band Mingwa. And you're rocking to the Lovecast with Dave O Rama.
album with a future.
Some surreal Southern Gothic funk from Toronto band Davis Hall and the Green Lanterns, featuring Jim Casson on drums, mallets, and synth bass, Jay Burr on tuba, Wayne DeAdder on guitar, and Mike Branton on slide guitar, with no one named Davis Hall in sight. The band's latest release is a film soundtrack called The Damnation, although I played something from the album Cambro called Humberstone. Maybe that's a cryptic code for getting stoned by the Humber River, maybe? American Latin rock musician and producer Adrian Quesada laying down some curious grooves with Neil Francis on a composition called The Inquisitor from the album Jaguar Sound, brought to you by the guitarist for the Black Pumas. We also heard from the band Soleil, which is the musical project of Swedish composer, producer, and multi-instrumentalist Daniel Kadawatha. Soleil with the soulful title track from their 2021 release, Time and Bottles. Diving deeper into exotica, psychedelic surf, and esoteric film music, New York psychedelic soul band Ghost Funk Orchestra, Conjuring a Solar Wind for my friend Sam, taken from the band's 2024 release, A Trip to the Moon. Anywhere there's sand on the moon, right? Shout out to Mr. Dr.Brotherman, who brought his own cinematic flavors with La Heist, as Dave O Rama takes this summer mess out to the beach to catch some rays and top up the vitamin D. We've hit the midpoint of the program where the sun is high and so am I. So please follow the deconstructed improvisations of Montreal music project Pacha as they guide you through station identification and into the next dimension of the Lovecast.
We're an all-woman Kuomintang ensemble based in Toronto.
And you're listening to The Lovecast with Dave O Rama.
You're down on the beach micro-dosing the Lovecast with Dave O Rama on this beautiful summer day, July 2025. I'm here with you, hanging out in the hammock, absorbing the sun rays and joyful sounds of summer lovers. Relaxing times this week on the Lovecast for folks seeking peace after a challenging week. Or, if things went well, then consider this the perfect cocktail to top off your good fortune and resilience. The music this week is hazy like the sun with a heavy cinematic flavor to spice up your weekend and relax all those tense muscles. It's all hazy and lazy and slightly crazy down here in the dunes, but the sand feels good between the toes. Babe Rainbow transmit their psychedelic sounds from the sunny surf regions of Australia, and they have a new release out called Slipper Imp and Shakerator. So let's find out what that's all about as Babe Rainbows takes us on a trip out Mount Dub right here, right now on the Lovecast.
I'm Lily Frost, and you're listening to the Lovecast with Dave O Rama.
as I count the days. I've been wasting my time away while I wait for it all to change.
From the 2024 release, I Too Am a Stranger, from the Ethio-jazz-inspired UK band The Sorcerers with something hypnotic called Kid Mahout. The Sorcerers have a new album out as well. It's called Otherworld and Habits, and it was just released yesterday. Back to Australia, where they appreciate the sun, and something from an album called Phase by the band Midlife, insisting that the gloves don't bite. We also had a sampling from KB's mixtape number 2. KB stands for Karate Boogaloo, another band from Australia bringing the sun-soaked instrumental soul with a really laid-back cover of the Kraftwerk song Tour de France, going out to all the bicycle riders buzzing around enjoying the heat. I'll send that one out to my friend Jesse, who often loves to set out on some seriously lengthy road adventures. And at the top of the hour, more Australian energy from the new release by psychedelic band Babe Rainbow, who took us on a hike up Mount Dub with their friend and collaborator Stu McKenzie from the band King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard, as Dave O Rama drops a sunny, psychedelic, chilled out mix to celebrate this beautiful summer day in a beach bum state of mind. Strap up your hammocks if you got them, as it's time we look into the sky, because Norwegian band Orion's Belt are here to bring us a balloon fest as Dave O Rama pumps out the rejuvenating solar energy right now on The Sound of Your City.
again? I said, the Lovecast with Dave O Rama. Yeah, the Lovecast with Dave O Rama.
the exciting sounds of Montreal-based Japanese-Canadian psychedelic rock band Teke from the band's 2024 Polaris long-listed release Hagata, an interesting mix of surf rock, Japanese pop, and cinematic flourishes. The band's new album Deluxe is currently available on Bandcamp for pre-order. They will be performing next weekend at the Vancouver Folk Music Festival before they perform select dates across Canada over the next couple of months. Toronto listeners can go check out Teke at Project Nowhere on October 2nd. Teke ending that set with the song Mikyu. Going back to 2023 with the album Silver, we also heard from discodelic female soul trio Say Shishi, straight out of Brooklyn, New York, with a fistful of Forget Me Not. And at the top of the mix, also from 2023, something from an album called Women by Norwegian instrumental band Orion's Belt, with a report from Balloon Fest 86. Going back in time with Orion's Belt here on the Lovecast as Dave O Rama soaks your ears in sunshine and coconut oil on this week's laid-back trip to the beach on a beautiful summer day, with a shout out to Surprise Chef, who also reaches your ears from way down under. Okay, for this last set, it's time for everyone to jump up and sink your feet into the sand as we end this week's Lovecast mix with some steamy dancing vibes to drive up the humidity index for the last chance to dance with the Lovecast.
Faz carinho em mim.
I'm Danny Bell from Danny Bell and His Disappointments. You are listening to the Lovecast with Dave O Rama.
we do it. It's her in my dreams, she was my queen. A castle in the mountaintops, rivers and streams. Plucking sunlight from the sky in my pocket. Give it to you later on in the form of a locket. But who knows the math? People in the back, for the people in the front, for the people on the side, for the people on the front, for the pew. It's like a loop machine. Yeah.
This is Squid from the Pseudos. Hi to Guai. We're a spaghetti surf rock band and we're happy to be here with Dave O Rama and the Lovecast. Get rammed!
It's a cinematic beach party this week on the Lovecast and some dreamy surf sounds from Calgary band the 427s taking us on a date to the Blue Cactus. Montreal-based Moroccan bluesman Othman Wahabi with a remastered version of the song Ghetto Prophet from his compilation album of remastered and unreleased material called Flipside. I also served up some psychedelic Latin flavors featuring a selection of bands, including something called Sabando from the Geneva-based group Leclerc from the album Noshta. Leclerc has released several albums and you can find them all on Bandcamp, of course. From Los Angeles, La Lome, also known as the Los Angeles League of Musicians. They're in the set, bringing the psychedelic cumbia and chicha vibes pumping out of their 72 Monte Carlo. And spearheading that spicy hot beach picnic, Canadian-based Colombian guitarist Roberto Lopez with something super tropical called Ensueño from his 2022 release Ritual. Ultimately wrapping up my super cinematic chilled out beach party as Dave O Rama celebrates the invigorating energy brought to you by that ever-present ball of fire we call the sun. And there you have it, another Lovecast in the can. If you would like to explore the globalsonic schizophonic history of the Lovecast, you can enjoy literally hundreds of past episodes which I have made available for all my devoted listeners at mixcloud.com/Dave O Rama or at thelovecast.podbean.com. You can also download individual episodes from my Podbean website, where you can also find links to the Lovecast on many of the popular streaming sites available online, if that's your preference. Please show me some love and share the Lovecast archives with your friends on your socials. I'd really appreciate your help getting the word out about me and the show. We've been here for 23 years. The Lovecast, positive vibes for challenging times. If you weren't able to get down to the beach during the program today, then I hope you at least exercise that fertile imagination of yours, allowing my musical mix to conjure up sun-soaked cinematic scenarios inside your mind. To wrap up my beach party today, I have something special queued up on the decks from the Dutch band Yin Yin. They are a quartet with a focus on funky disco psychedelia presented in a Southeast Asian style. From Yin Yin, I leave you with the perseverance of Sano. And until we hook up here on Lovecast Beach again next week, this is Dave O Rama wishing you peace, love, curiosity, consciousness, and an incredibly fertile imagination.